I always thought losing my brother's trust would be the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I was wrong. My name is not important. What matters is that I spent 19 years building a landscaping and irrigation business from the back of a beat-up Ford pickup, and I handed the financial side of that business to the woman I married because I trusted her the way you trust the ground beneath your feet. You don't think about it. It's just there. Her name was Tilda. We met at a church barbecue in Knoxville when I was 31 and she was 28. She had this laugh that made every room feel smaller in the best way. Smart as a whip, organized in a way I never was. Within a year, she was handling our invoicing, payroll, vendor payments, all of it. I was outside every day, managing crews, pulling permits, fixing irrigation lines in the July heat. The business grew. We bought a house. We had our son, and life felt like it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Then, one Tuesday evening in March, I came home 2 hours early because a job got rained out. Her car was in the driveway. So was a silver Tacoma I didn't recognize. I sat in my truck for a minute, just looking at it. Tennessee plates. A parking pass from a university hospital hanging from the rear view. I told myself it was probably her cousin. Told myself a lot of things in those 60 seconds before I went inside. The front door was unlocked. I stepped into my own house and heard her voice upstairs. Not the tone of someone talking to family. Something softer, more careful. The kind of voice people use when they're protecting something. I walked back out, got in my truck, and drove to the end of the street. I sat there for 45 minutes until the silver Tacoma backed out of my driveway and left. I wrote down the plate number on the back of a gas receipt. I don't know why exactly. Instinct, maybe. Or the part of me that already knew. I didn't say anything that night. I made dinner. I watched my son do his homework. I kissed my wife on the cheek when she said she was tired and going to bed early. And I sat alone at the kitchen table thinking about that parking pass from the hospital. The next morning, I called a guy I went to high school with who works in county records. I gave him the plate number and asked him to tell me who the truck was registered to. He called me back in an hour. The name he gave me meant nothing to me, but the employer listed on the related registration address did. It was a private cardiology practice, about 6 miles from our house. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I know some people would have, but I needed to be sure. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I blew up my family on a feeling. Over the next 3 weeks, I started paying attention to things I should have been paying attention to for years. I pulled up our business accounting software one evening when Tilda was at her book club. She managed everything through it. Accounts payable, receivable, payroll, all of it. I'm not a financial guy. Never claimed to be, but I know how to read numbers when I'm motivated. And I was motivated. It took me about 2 hours to find the first one. A payment of $3,400 to a vendor called Ridgeline Supply Co. I didn't recognize the name, so I looked it up. No website. No reviews. No business license on file in Knox County. Just a name attached to an account that had been receiving payments from my company for the past 2 years. I kept looking. By midnight, I had found 9 separate vendors that didn't exist. I didn't sleep that night. The total, as best I could calculate, was somewhere north of $52,000, spread over 26 months. Not all at once. Never more than $4,000 in any single month. Small enough to not trigger anything obvious in a quarterly review. Smart, careful, patient. I thought about the silver Tacoma in my driveway. I thought about the doctor with the hospital parking pass. I thought about the woman upstairs sleeping while I sat at the table she picked out for this kitchen in the house we bought together, trying to figure out how long I had been a fool. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not a friend, not someone who might know. Tilda, a divorce attorney in a firm on the other side of the city. I told him everything. He told me not to touch anything in the accounting software, not to move any money, and to document everything before I said a word to my wife. So I did. I spent the next week photographing records, printing statements, building a folder. I also hired a private investigator, which I never thought I'd do in my life, and which cost me more than I want to admit. Within 4 days, he confirmed what the part of me I'd been trying to quiet already knew. Tilda and the cardiologist had been seeing each other for at least 14 months. He gave me dates, locations, photographs. I didn't want to look at, but looked at anyway because I needed them to be real. I filed for divorce on a Thursday. I had my attorney send her the paperwork at noon, and I arranged to be away from the house when she received it, taking our son to my mother's for the weekend under the pretense of a family visit. My mother didn't ask too many questions. She looked at my face when I walked in with our boy and just put her hand on my arm and said, "Okay." The divorce was ugly in the way these things always are. Tilda denied everything, then admitted the affair, but denied the financial fraud. Our son was 8 years old and did not understand why his parents suddenly couldn't be in the same room. I had a lawyer and a forensic accountant and a folder of evidence. She had excuses. The courts moved slowly, the way courts do. We were separated, living in the same house for 3 months. Her in the master bedroom, me in what used to be the guest room, while things got sorted out legally. It was the longest 3 months of my life. We were polite to each other in front of our son. We were nothing to each other in every other moment. She left in September. Took what she was entitled to, which was less than she'd wanted, partly because of the fraud findings. The forensic accountant's report became part of the settlement record. She didn't face criminal charges in the end. My lawyer and I made a calculated decision that a civil resolution would be faster and less damaging for our son than a criminal prosecution that could drag on for years. She paid back a negotiated portion. I won't pretend it felt like justice. It felt like math. She moved in with a cardiologist 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I found out from our son, who mentioned it without understanding what he was telling me, the way kids do. I didn't react in front of him. I waited until I was alone in the truck in a parking lot, and I just sat there for a while with my hands on the steering wheel. 3 months passed. I focused on work. I focused on my son. I learned how to cook more than 4 things. I started waking up at 5 in the morning and running because I needed somewhere to put everything I was carrying, and running was the only thing that helped. Then one Saturday morning in December, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. It was a 865 area code, Knoxville. So I picked up. "Is this Tilda's ex-husband?" It was a woman's voice, careful, a little hesitant. I said yes. "This is her younger sister. We've never met in person. I don't know if she ever mentioned me." She hadn't. In 19 years, Tilda had described her family as distant and complicated. I knew she had a sister somewhere. I didn't know a name, didn't know where she lived. "She didn't talk about you much," I told her honestly. A pause. Then, I figured, that's kind of why I'm calling. Another pause. "I have something I think you need to see. I know this is strange. I know I'm the last person you expected to hear from, but I've been sitting on this for 2 months and I can't sit on it anymore." She asked if she could come by. I almost said no. Whatever was between me and Tilda felt like something I'd survived, not something I wanted reopened. But something in the woman's voice made me say yes. She drove 2 hours from her home in Chattanooga that same afternoon. She was younger than Tilda by about 7 years. She stood at my door with a vanilla envelope and an expression that reminded me of someone about to do something difficult but necessary. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the one Tilda had picked out, and she set the envelope between us. "She gave me this before she left you," she said. "She told me that if anything ever happened to her, I should give it to you." I didn't know what she meant and I didn't ask. But 2 weeks ago, Tilda called me from a number I didn't recognize and she was frightened. I mean, genuinely frightened. She told me that the man she was living with, the doctor, wasn't who he claimed to be. She said he'd done things that she'd found out about and that she'd made the mistake of telling him she knew. I felt something cold move through me. "I haven't been able to reach her since that call," she said quietly. "Her phone goes straight to voicemail. She's not at the address I have for her. I've filed the missing persons report, but they told me she has to be missing longer before they take it seriously. And I didn't know what else to do except bring this to you." I opened the envelope. Inside were printed copies of financial documents, emails, and a handwritten letter. The letter was addressed to me. She'd written it in the weeks before she left. I could tell from some of the references she made. She said she was sorry. She said she knew that didn't mean anything and probably never would. But she also said something I didn't expect. She said the affair had started 2 years before I discovered it, and that shortly after it began, the cardiologist had started pressuring her to access the business accounts. He was the one who had suggested the shell vendors. He was the one who had built the account structure she'd used. She'd been both a participant and, she wrote, increasingly a hostage. She wrote, "If you're reading this, something has gone wrong." She went on to describe things he had told her about a previous business partner, about a woman in North Carolina who had tried to report him to a state licensing board and had later been found to have died in what was ruled an accidental fall. She hadn't reported any of it while she was with him. She was afraid, but she had documented it. Dates, locations, things he had said, and those documents were also in the envelope. I sat at that table with her sister and I read everything twice. Then I called my attorney. Then I called the Knoxville Police Department. Then, on my attorney's advice, I called the FBI's financial crimes tip line. Because the shell vendor structure Tilda had described crossed state lines. It moved faster than I expected after that. Faster than my divorce had. Faster than anything to do with the law had ever moved in my experience. I learned later that the cardiologist had been under a separate investigation for healthcare billing fraud for 8 months. My documents, combined with what federal investigators already had, apparently completed a picture they'd been building. They found Tilda 6 days later. She was alive. She'd been staying with a woman she knew from a yoga class, someone the cardiologist didn't know about, using a prepaid phone. She'd been hiding. He was arrested 4 days after that. The charges were long, and I won't list all of them here. What I will say is that the North Carolina case was reopened. I didn't call Tilda. I thought about it, sat with my phone in my hand thinking about it for a long time. But I had a son who was learning to sleep through the night again after months of bad dreams. I had a business to rebuild. I had a life that was starting carefully to look like something I recognized. Her sister called me a week after the arrest to thank me. I told her a week after the arrest to thank me. I told her I didn't do it for Tilda. "I know," she said, "but I think on some level she was counting on you anyway." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. My son is 9 now. He doesn't ask about his mother the way I feared he would. He asks in the quiet, sideways way that 9-year-olds do, when we're driving somewhere or right before he falls asleep. I try to answer him honestly, in ways that don't put weight on him that isn't his to carry. I tell him his mother is a complicated person who made some hard choices. I tell him she loves him. I believe that's true. The business is doing better than it was before any of this happened, which I still find strange to say. Hiring a proper bookkeeper, someone with credentials and references, and not a personal stake in my life, turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. Turns out when you're not bleeding money through fake vendors, the margins on irrigation work are actually pretty solid. I don't run at 5 in the morning anymore. I run at 6, which is when the light comes up over the ridge behind my house and the whole yard turns gold for about 10 minutes. My son has started joining me sometimes, which I didn't ask for, but wouldn't trade. I'm not sure what I believe about people anymore, whether they're mostly good or mostly something more complicated. I think about the version of Tilda, who handed her sister that envelope, who wrote me a letter she wasn't sure I'd ever read, who was scared enough to hide in a friend's apartment for weeks. I think about the version of Tilda, who spent 2 years slowly draining my business under instruction from a man she was afraid to leave. Both of those people are the same person. I've stopped trying to resolve that. What I know is this. My son is going to grow up watching his father get up in the morning, go to work, and come home. He's going to watch his father cook dinner and check his homework and show up to every game and every school performance, without drama, without excuses. He'll understand what kind of man his father is from watching, not from anything I tell him. Some mornings that's enough to get out of bed. Most mornings, honestly, it's more than enough.